Hello, gentle people. Welcome back to F.L.O.W. I am your host for tonight, Vondell. F.L.O.W. stands for Fellowship, Love, Outreach, and Worship. And this week we are doing our 7 words. We are on day 4, and our word for today is cross. On day 1, we talked about having the right weight. Well, I lied. On day 1, we talked about persistence, the need to persist. And the day after that, we talked about weight and shedding the right weight or having the right weight. And yesterday, we talked about joy and how that ties into our Christian walk. And like I said, today, we are going to be talking about cross. I have our panelist here that you can't see yet. But we have our panelists that we are going to be talking about this topic. And thank you for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment and share and comment and all that good stuff. And after this video about why we run, we're going to get into it.
Christianity is a race because we're running against time. We don't know how long we have here in this world, and we have to make sure that we're ready and that we get others ready as well. We don't know how much time others have here in this world, so we have to take our mission seriously. That's pretty much it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to night 4 of 7 words around endurance. You see their smiling faces. Like I said before, we're trying to take up too much time. So we're going to begin with reading the scripture that we've been grounding ourselves in the discussion, and then we'll get right into it. Y'all good? You ready? All right, let's do this. So Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. What I'm going to start off in verse 2 today. Looking away from all that will distract us and focusing our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of faith, the first incentive for our belief and the one who brings our faith to maturity, who for the joy of accomplishing the goal set before him endured the cross, disregarding the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God, revealing his deity, his authority, and the completion of his work. Today, everybody, we're going to start by talking about the cross. And so we've been asking all week what these words have to do with endurance. So to all my panelists, what does the cross have to do with endurance? And for everyone watching us, feel free to type in the chat. We'll be bringing your comments right on screen so the panelists can see them. We want to bring you into our conversation as we go more on throughout the week. So feel free to share your thoughts and comments, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. All right, everybody, what does the cross do with endurance?
I have one word answer: love. Love. That's it.
That's interesting.
Honestly, I thought one answer.
Huh?
You supposed to? I said that sounds like a punk move, like that one answer thing. Like,
what do you mean?
So for me, endurance is a product of love. Some people say byproduct, but when you look at a byproduct, it's something that came about that wasn't intended to come about. But endurance for me is a product of love.
All right. So Anderson trying to start off real mellow.
I think, like, I'm answering the question. I don't know if that's what you asked, but I'm asking the question: what is the cross? Have to do with endurance, and what does it mean then? And it represents the suffering that you have to go through, right? We don't like to talk about the suffering as Christians and just as human beings, right? We don't like to know that life, we have to go through hardships, and we have to have some uncomfortable moments.
Mhm.
We have to have some difficult moments and some changes, right? So
Mhm.
the cross represents those moments where we may think that are unnecessary and we shouldn't be going through this, and we don't deserve, to be going through this hard time, and I do so many things that are good, quote unquote, so I shouldn't be experiencing these kind of difficulties, right? So I think the cross represents the burden and the suffering that we have to go through in life and also in the Christian world. So
Alexia, so I was really thinking about this, and I felt a lot of things come to me, and I hope today I'm gonna be able to slide in what the Spirit told me while listening to Jay-Z, being transparent. But that's the answer, because we don't want to move too far away from the tangible example that we have in the run. Like, we talk about the running this race.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you, Alexia. The cross represents the stuff that you're gonna feel, not that you may feel, the stuff that you're going to feel, right? Or I think you said have to. I agree with you. There are some things that you're gonna have to feel when you engage in this type of exercise or this type of endeavor. And I think that's what the cross represents for me.
Yeah. So my thought is, when we're talking about endurance, because the question was the correlation between the cross and endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think, the Bible says in Luke chapter 9, verse 23, and he said unto all of them, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Right. So y'all know that this entire week I've been talking about endurance being the stamina that you have. So the correlation for me is looking at if I'm able to carry that cross on my shoulder and still make it to the finish line.
Right.
So that's where the correlation comes for me. That cross, it's everything that we're going through is leading to this one moment. And are we going to be able to hold our weight or hold the weight of the cross to get to the finish line?
So when I say love, like all that's incorporated. When you look at why we do anything, it's because we love something, right? It's either we're looking for it's. So I can speak from being a parent, right? I do what I do not because necessarily I want to, but because I love my kids. I get up and I take them to places that they gotta go, not because I want to. I don't care to go, but they gotta go. So you know what? I'll get up and take them. I do it out of love. Sometimes to carry that cross, there has to be an aspect of love in there. We're not just gonna pick up the cross and say, "Yo, let me carry the cross." Simon of Cyrene, he picked up the cross when it was put on him, and he carried it not simply because he was ordered to, but there was a love aspect in that.
But what is endurance?
No, he's getting away. Yeah, you're talking about what it takes to pick up the cross. I want to know, what does the cross represent?
Right.
What does the cross itself have to do with endurance?
Right. So, I mean, we have to understand why we're going to pick up the cross in the first place to be able to carry it, right? Because we're not going to see the cross and just say, "Hey, I'm gonna pick it up and just run with it." That's where a lot of Christians, to me, a lot of people fail when it comes to this walk, is that the motivation behind it isn't love. You see what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. No, like I get what you're saying, and I think for Christ, right, a major part of it is love, right? A major part of it is his love for us, right? But I don't think it's solely love. It's the reason why he went through. Because remember, he went to his father and said, "Listen, yo, if you can take this from me, I don't want it." Even, and in that moment, he loved us still, but he's like, "If there's another way, let me let's figure this out." I realized what I signed up for. Can we negotiate something? But I think it's obedience. I don't think it's love. I think it's obedience that he had the commitment that he made to God to continue to pick up, to continue to endure his cross, right? I think it's love is fickle. Love is like you're in and out. But I think
Whoa. What did you say?
no. Listen, our love is fickle, right? Our love is fickle, and I feel like it's obedience most of the time. We have to be obedient in choosing, because it's not always oh, I love my kids, or I love my husband. There are going to be hardships sometimes where you don't feel that love, but because I'm obedient to God, because I'm obedient and I know his word, I am going to still endure the cross.
Well, okay, so Alexia, I would agree with you if only I believed that love was a choice. I mean, sorry, if I did not believe that love was a choice. Because I believe that love is a choice, even in times when I don't have the emotion behind it, I'm choosing to do this out of love. That's my standpoint. And it may not even necessarily be, because there are times when Rob and I might get into something and he might be hungry. Now, even though I don't feel attached to him in that moment, I might be angry at him. The root of it is that I love him.
My hands ain't broke.
They aren't. And I'll remember that next time. The fact of the matter is I'm choosing. I think it's a combination of the choice to love and commitment, like you said, that helps us to endure the cross.
And see, I think you all are, for me, talking about the things we need to pick up the cross. And I want to talk about the cross itself. Like
right.
We have to go through.
That's
we got to deal with that. We got to deal with that part though. But
he's go ahead. Too far ahead. We need to address what it is first.
Well, I think you're right? If you don't know what the cross itself is, how can you do what the scripture says, which is take it up and follow me? And I think I love the Amplified version because it highlights that I think the cross represents many things, but one of the things that I think is important for our talk about endurance is kind of this idea of self-denial.
Sacrifice.
Yeah. Denying self.
You guys say sacrifice. I don't know if self-denial is sacrifice, but if we're saying the same thing, then
yeah, it is.
All right. Well, I mean,
sacrificing your desires, sacrificing the things that you most treasure in this world, and you're looking forward to what Christ is offering you.
I agree, because if you look at the literally in terms of when Christ was carrying his cross, the cross represents death, right? And it represents. I agree with what you said, Rob. It's dying to self, dying, like Susan said, it's dying to one's own thoughts, one's desires. It's dying to how I want to do things, right? Because if he had a choice, he's like, I would like to give it up, but in this moment, I'm dying to myself and what I may be feeling right now. And I'm going to follow you, right? I'm going to be obedient and follow you, or I'm out of the love. I am going to continue to endure the cross. So I agree. I think the cross represents death of self.
And the practicality of it all is because I'm here and I'm doing this work and I'm trying to work to create these spaces with all of you because I believe in the end result. And I believe that what we're doing is God defined and necessary to help people grow spiritually. But I can't even tell you, I can't even really quantify how often I have to deny self because I would drop this and break out. Like I would be done with it all because there are times that I get frustrated because it doesn't seem like people are responding. It doesn't seem like people get it. People don't really understand where we're coming from and they're coming down on it. And there are a lot of things that make me think about me and how I feel that I have to put aside in order for me to endure. So I essentially pick up my own cross and say, all right, God, I got you. So that's why I kind of want to talk about that.
So I have a thought, and it's more around a difficulty that I have, which is, at the beginning of this conversation, Alexia said something that I believe it's true that the cross represents the suffering that we're going to have to endure. It represents trials and tribulations. And I think the thing that I struggle with in ministry and in life is that I feel like sometimes my cross is heavier than other people's. And it's kind of like, like this one person could be like, oh, I'm so stressed out because, I have to work to pay to get through school. But then me, my issue is bigger. I can't, for instance, I can't go to school because I can't afford it or whatever. And so it's kind of like sometimes, and don't get me wrong, y'all, because I understand that, it's out of love that we do these things, and we're supposed to be looking at Christ as the example and denying ourselves. But sometimes for me, it's difficult when, I'm looking at other people who seem to have it easier than I do. And we're all in the Christian race together. So it's kind of like if I'm a Christian and you're a Christian and God is saying that I have to have a cross and you have to have a cross, why my cross feel heavier?
So Susan, on the screen right here, Cynthia Verna says, I think love can be measured by two things, sacrifice and time. We all have 24 hours in a day. No matter how much money you make, you still get 24 hours. I think as well as the opposite of love is not hate but selfishness. So I think actually her comment about love can be connected to your comment about the cross and what it means, because it often has this element of, like, as you say, comparison because of time. I am sacrificing this X amount of time, this X amount of energy to do this thing, while you not. And like, that, what does that mean for me, right? Like, and the stress and strain that I think it puts on us in considering that, I think is a big thing to consider.
Or even the requirement that is made. Like sometimes it feels like God requires more of other people, or more of me maybe than he requires of other people.
To whom is given much is.
That's my lane.
We're gonna get philosophical here. That's what
we
Yo, but Anderson, I think Anderson's response though is true. And when we talk about this week, I sometimes struggle between wanting to make sure that I come off relatable and saying that, like, I'm here not because of anything magical, because of hard work, but I want people to know that, like, I'm here because these are things that you have to grasp, right? What Susan is talking about is your cross is your cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for us to bear because it is our cross. Nobody else can carry our cross. And I think that is so difficult to wrap your mind around.
I hear you guys. And to Susan's question, I would ask this, right? How many times have we contributed to our own cross? How many times have we actually made our cross more heavy than it needed to be? I have to be real, because I look at the things that I've done in my personal life, and some of it was like, girl, what were you thinking? Like, I have gotten clear, like, direction to go somewhere else, but because of my own wants, desires, and needs, now I'm dealing with extra baggage or extra trauma that if I was still and obedient, I have to take something for me, I'm saying I'm at the place where I understand my actions and how the cross that I'm bearing, right? And I have to take some responsibility in that. So for me, I'm at the place where,
but what if
that's not where he hasn't given me what
if it's something that you have no control over? So, it's different. Like, have God said, Alexia, don't go to that party, and you went to that party, and now all of a sudden, you end up in some deep trouble, or whatever. Like, that's one thing. Then, yeah, you put that cross on yourself. But what about situations where, and you see it all the time, you see some people who live in poverty and other people who are wealthier, and they have no control over their situations. And, we're all Christians, so it's kind of like, I understand where Rob is coming from. I'm just, bringing out the point that sometimes it can be difficult.
I agree.
That's why it is the cross. And I think that when we look at the comparison, to really, because I was really trying to wrestle with this, and I have another thing, but for me, the cross is difficult to bear because it is our cross. It does require a sacrifice. And if you look at what Christ went through, Alexia pointed it out twice, and I think that is why we see Gethsemane. I think that is why we have to understand that he agonized in the garden, because everyone, when they're brought in contact, or not contact, when they come face to face with the reality of
The situation.
the situation, right? And what they're actually, Christ is bearing at that moment. This is what always blows my mind. This is kind of what grounds me a little bit as a Christian. At that moment, every single sin, right, on the cross, every single sin that was ever had and ever will be had, he bore in that moment. And he was as far from God as anyone could ever be. And he did that, though, because for us. And I think that's why it's like, it is very hard, because we're brought face to face with the reality of like, yeah, the things that you want, you may have to put that down for somebody else.
So to speak what you're saying, Rob, let's look at the cross and the procession to the mount. Jesus, 3 times he fainted from carrying the cross. 3 times, right? On the 3rd time, they ordered somebody to carry the cross who was already willing to carry it, because he was a believer, though not known publicly. He was a believer. He was willing to help Christ carry that cross to his final destination, right? Because he saw the state of his master. I think Susan spoke about the differences in Christianity, where you have, just like in the world, you have the rich and the poor, and we kind of look at the poor suffer. I can't say we, because I ain't rich.
You try to tell us
something? No, listen, I need a few more zeros. Let's talk about that with God. But we look at that situation, and one of my biggest things have always been, when we say pick up your cross and carry it, we have to understand that's both. It's an individual thing, but also remember that we were asked to help each other out.
Yeah. Yep.
So here we have Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus carry this cross, because Jesus at this point is just too weak to do it. He's been beaten, skin ripped off. He's been abused, spat on, all of this, crown of thorns smashed in his head, all of that. So he's just weak. He can't do it. He tried 3 times. He can't do it. When we see our brothers and sisters struggling, do we put that hand out? Because part of carrying our cross is also, like the word tells us, bearing with one another and carrying our brothers and sisters' burdens. So when their cross gets a little bit too heavy, it's our job to help relieve that, and not to say, "Oh, listen, well, I hope things work out for you, sis. I hope things work for you." Like, I'm praying for you. I don't want, like, if you're able to help me, help me. I don't want you praying.
And it's 110%. How many individuals that we know are friends with or look at the Christian walk and say, and that's kind of the reason why they don't. Because how people who are part of the faith, how they're treated. I think Alexia talked about it in one of the early nights, how they're treated, how people treat them and say, yo, if you treat somebody like that and you say you're a believer, why should I come into that fold in faith, right? Why should I decide to run this particular race? Is it the moment that somebody catches a hamstring, no one's getting arm under, they're saying, oh, that looks like it hurts. Drink some water and pray on that, right? And they don't give you the water, and they sometimes barely stop to pray with you. They keep it moving. But I do not want to lose sight of this, because I think both of these are connected. The cross is self-denial, and it's something that we have to pick up. And in Hebrews, in that chapter, I want to jump to the end. I'm using like multiple devices, y'all. I hope I can do it from my brain. And when it talks about what Christ did, it says, now when you go through things, I believe it's in verse 3. I'm pulling it up now. When you go through things, think about what he went through in comparison, because it puts that on perspective. Yeah, all right. So verse 2, I want to make sure everyone knows that we ground all this in the word. Why can't I find verse 2? Mercy, y'all. Anderson,
You want me to read it?
I feel like it's time for me to get them glasses. All right, here we go. Looking away from all that will distract us and focusing on our eyes on Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of the faith. The first incentive for our belief, the one who brings our faith to maturity, who for the joy of accomplishing the goal set before him endured the cross, okay? Mm-hmm. The joy set before him, we talked about it last night, he endured the cross, discarding the shame. That's a big thing when it comes to self-denial. Sat down the right hand of the throne of God, revealing his deity, his authority, his completion of his work. Just consider and meditate on him who endured from sinners such bitter hostility against himself. Consider it all in comparison with your trials, that you will not grow weary.
So, in other words, it ain't that your trials ain't
that deep. It
ain't that deep.
So, I'm gonna go and tell you about your feelings, and I think I'm worried about that. I do.
So, I actually wanted to. I feel like we owe Anderson a little apology.
For what? Alexia is like, no.
We do, because think about it. You know, like I'm sitting here listening to this text, and the Bible is saying, you know, basically encouraging us to endure by reflecting on what Christ suffered for us. Right. And you know, in my mind, the only way that I would even care about enduring the cross, and because the thing is, if we're reading our Bibles, and even if we don't, just based on experiences that we've had in our life, you know, it's hard being a Christian, you know, and so it's kind of like
by yourself,
it would be a lot easier to hop off the train and be like, you know what, God, I get that you did whatever you did for me, but I've had enough. But it takes a measure of love, I think. Even to be obedient, it takes a measure of love.
Alexia is like, nope.
Because I have the option.
I know, I agree. I agree to an extent, but our love is not the same love. We don't understand that because my thing is, when we think about
just really quickly, it's not the same love, but we're challenged as Christians to love like that. Yeah. And so if we're loving like Christ loves, then that's the way that we endure the cross. That's the way the love that we choose to activate to endure the cross.
You're right. Go ahead, Alexia. You're right.
No, I agree. Right? I agree, but I think
negates all that.
No, it's not a but. It's not a but. I think they're connected, like you said, right? Yeah. I think I can't just chalk it up to love, right? Because there are gonna be times where it comes where I think even though we're called to love like Christ, even that in itself is obedience, right? Even that in itself is a daily dying to self. It's daily saying, I am dying to you. Even if I don't love what I'm going through right now, I am dying to myself daily to get to that place. I don't have that kind of love right now.
I think
there.
You say that, Alexia. I think you look at love still as a feeling.
Yes.
And you're speaking.
No, not as a feeling.
Hold on. I think you're speaking about aspects of love, because I think within love you have self-denial. Within love you have obedience. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13. Right?
I suppose so.
Love. Love encompasses all those things. And how do I know that? Because God did that. God then sent Christ. Christ is an example of love. So everything that he does and the choices he makes, I think, are indicative of love, and our choices based on that. But I think that's why Anderson kind of cheat and say like the cross represents love.
Right, which is why for me, I said, sorry, really quickly, which is why for me, I said it's like I feel like what we're doing right now is like what came first, the chicken or the egg type
thing. Right, that's very true.
And like in my mind though, like when you talk about obedience, again, I have the choice to obey or not to obey. The thing that makes me want to obey is because knowing what is in front of me, I still want to obey because I love God.
1 John 4, right? Like, we know love because he sacrificed his son for us. The cross represents love and self-denial. Go ahead, Anderson.
I was gonna say, for God so loved the world. He gave his only begotten son.
Where's his mute button?
But no, for real, what you guys are saying is real. When I was younger, my mom would tell you, like, I gave her some issues. I I didn't have the love that I had for the love that I have now. I didn't have it for my mom. I actually thought my mom didn't care for me. So you know what? You don't care for me. I don't care about you. You know, I do stuff because you asked me to, and I don't want to get beat. But the things that I really want to do that you may not like, you're not going to stop me from doing them. I'm going to do them anyway. Today, though, having that understanding of what my mother's love was like in those times where I didn't feel loved, I'm like, wow, like from seeing it from this perspective, it made me like respect my mother so much more. So you know what? Mommy calls nowadays and says, oh, son, I need X, Y, and Z, or son, can you do da da da? Oh yeah, sure, mom, no problem. I may not even feel like doing it, but you know what? Because I love you, I'll get up and do it.
So let's make this connection because Anderson is so right.
It must feel good, huh, Anderson?
He sips water conveniently. Sips water anyway. If the cross represents love at the end of the day,
and love isn't void of endurance.
And that's so. I was trying to get to that point, right?
Love endurance.
Yeah. And I think that's why it is actually so very hard to love. I think Alexia was kind of alluding to it. That's what I wanted to get to. Because the other aspect that I think the cross represents in peace, and I kind of took notes on this. So if we know the cross represents love, then these are just pieces of that love. I think the other thing that makes it hard is that the cross also represents a point of transition.
Yep.
Right? Like at the cross, change happens. And to be practical, not many of us like change.
Nope.
And I think when we realize that's what love is, it actually sometimes limits our love because love, the choice to love will encourage you to make changes in your life. And we don't often want to do that, right? Like, why would I choose to come to this person if he's going to ask me to do things differently? But that's exactly what the cross represents. When you pick that up, you're saying, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to choose to be differently than I was before. That's what his love moves you to do. And I think that's what love is constantly asking of us, to like be at a point of transition, to know that, hey, you're going to have to change in order to really grow in the situation. You're going to have to deny yourself to grow in the situation. And the reality is that the root of all that is the simple word change. And let's be honest, we don't like change. We try to establish our worlds to be as consistent as possible. And if anyone hears this, I have found that desire to be consistent is sometimes the antithesis of being a Christian, because the only thing that is constant is Christ. And when we demand to be consistent in our own lives, I think we try to be God of our own worlds. And I think there's a danger in that. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with developing a routine, but sometimes we can make that routine itself
God
greater.
The Bible says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
I'm done. Yeah.
You ain't him.
Somebody gets seasoned. But I agree with what you're saying, because I think and I know we're using the same words in like I'm using obedience, but it's the same thing as love in that sense. But I think for me, I really want people to understand that it's not an easy decision, right? Because oftentimes people think as if, oh, if I love you, because oftentimes, one, like Rob said, we curate our own life, right? We're around the people who we like and like us, right? We go to the church that we like and that we feel that they've accepted us, right? We go to the job or whatever that makes us feel comfortable. We are around, we curate our own life to the comfort that we want, right? And to be honest, if we look at the cross and we look at what the example that Jesus had given us, it's a total opposite of that. No part of that is comfort. No part of it is free of pain. So what I'm trying to get people to understand, yes, it's like love, but it's not just like, oh, I love you. And
it's TV love.
It's not TV love. It's not Disney kind of love. It's a choice, right?
Ain't no fairy tales.
When it comes on to dying to self, I've experienced. Listen, being in a marriage,
we could all testify.
just like a moment, because my thing is, dying to self isn't a walk in the park.
Nope.
It is painful. It says Christ had to endure suffering,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we
And
have to understand what that means.
Yeah.
It's not that we're not going to have a peace, because he did promise us peace in the journey, and he did promise us joy, right? But we have to understand that there's a part of this journey that we're going to have to endure some very uncomfortable situations,
Yeah.
and we can't keep scooting around the idea that we want to create this perfect life. Here in America, we very much are on the road to creating this like, look at the pandemic. People were just going crazy because you're like, this is not the life that I had planned for 2020.
Which was
You know,
crazy. They were mad because they didn't have their crazy life.
my best life. Right? I think we have to be realistic in some of, and I think that's where what Anderson talked about in terms of being able to hold each other's hand on the journey, because we have to be honest about the journey itself and about the struggles that we're going to go through.
So I'll say that you make a very good point, Alexia. And I'll say that, like, for me personally, one of the times that I realized what this Christian journey was like really about was when I lost my cousin, 14 years old, and he died suddenly. And I remember the night before that, I had sort of like recommitted myself to Christ, and I said, Lord, I'm quit. I'm done running. Whatever your will is, let your will be done in my life. The next morning, I get a call that my cousin just like randomly like dropped in the kitchen at 14 years old.
Wow.
And a couple of minutes later, I get a call that he's gone.
Wow.
And I remember vowing to myself from then, you know what, God, I'm not going to say your will be done anymore. What happens?
No,
your will be done. And that's when the Christian journey became real for me, because up until that point, I had never experienced a loss like that.
Right.
You know, I might have gotten disappointed. Yeah, I didn't do so well on a test, or you know, I prayed that I would get a something for Christmas that I didn't get. You know, that was like the extent of my disappointment. But never before had I been in a situation where I literally said, "God, your will be done," and the next day,
that
the
happened.
most unthinkable thing happened to me. And
Oh,
so when we're talking about enduring the cross, and you know, to Alexia's point, we're gonna go through some things.
mhm.
And the reality is we're not always going to be at the point where we can say, you know what, God, regardless of what happens, you know, regardless of what happens, I'm here. But I think the point of the journey is one, you know, as Anderson so beautifully said, we're supposed to bear each other's burdens. So even in that time when I didn't feel like I could pray for myself, because there was a good period where I was not talking to God after that. There were people who were there to uplift me, and I'm sure they prayed on my behalf. And even then, you know, although it took me a while to get back on track, I realized, I got to the point where I realized, okay, Susan, this really bad thing happened to you, but God knew what He was doing. You know, so it's a journey, and we're not always going to be, you know, 100%. We're not always going to be at a place where we can accept every single thing that comes our way. But at the end of the day, you know, the cross means self-denial, but also trusting His perfect love for us, and that He's going to, not only are we carrying the cross, but He's going to carry us.
So go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I like the other end of that. That is so, like, loss you can't argue with. And it's not even about arguing. I'm just saying, like, that's the other end of that I've found my struggle has been with, is what happens if you're just okay? Like, what happens if what he asks you to carry, right, when you commit to him, is a journey that's more like a Moses and Jonah? Because at both times in my life, I felt like I was both of them, right? Jonah, when it's like, Lord, why you want me to talk to them? These are the people that made fun of me. These are the people that diss my mom. These are the people that don't really pay attention to me and think that I'm bad because I got braids in my hair, and think that I'm bad because I go to public school, and thinking I'm bad because I don't do things the way they do it, right? When they do all that and God's like, but I want you to talk to their children. I want you to be an example for their children. How do you do that? That's one aspect. And the other aspect is like Moses, right? Like, maybe the life I'm living isn't rich and lavish, but it's okay, right? And I can go drink like all the people, right? And I can go smoke like everybody else and they're okay. They can be okay, you know? And so it's sometimes not even, for me, I'm like, it's not even drastic sometimes. It's just the reality that he's asking you to put aside whatever you think is best for your life and do what he wants you to do. And then when you do it, like the children of Israel, if you're Moses, all you hear is complaining. All you hear is how they wish that you had done things this way and that way. And I think that's hard too. I want to talk about both ends. I want to talk about the person that does commit and Jesus gives them the biggest, baddest cross, right then and there, like a loss. Or Jesus gives you a couple of small crosses to put around your neck, you know? Little things like get on the boat, go talk to them, go preach to them. You're just like, yo, these are starting to get heavy, God. Like, oh.
So why do we respond those way though? Why do we respond in the why do we even like going back to what Susan shared, such a vulnerable experience, even like how you responded, right? That kind of reflex, or like why do we respond in those ways? And I think oftentimes we don't realize that most of the times when we respond in those ways is that's us trying to protect ourselves, right? Protect ourselves from one, we feel vulnerable, we feel like we don't trust whatever we're supposed to be there to protect us, right? It's like, God, I just told you your will be done, and this is what you gave me, right? So in those moments, we're protecting ourselves, and even in the situation that Rob gave in terms of, my life is okay, but it's not like crazy. But in those sense, I had created my life to protect myself. We've created people around us for us to feel comfortable and all that stuff. But just throw a little Bible scripture in there in Luke 9:24, verse 25, it says, whosoever would save his life will lose it. Will lose it, but whosoever loses his life for my sake will save it. And I think we have to get to the point, which is why we go back to what Anderson's saying. It's a journey with all of us, and we have to go back to daily trust in God, because it's not easy. But I can't sugarcoat it and say, use this tool and use this tool. It's a journey that we all have to be accountable for each other in, and hold each other responsible, and hold each other when we're experiencing those hard times, right? Because I may not be going through that hard time that Susan was going, but I'm not going to judge her if she had that response in that moment, right? Yeah. I'm going to be there to encourage her. I'm going to be there to pray for her and uplift her in those moments, and not letting someone feel like, man, I did something so bad, then I can't even show up my face anymore. You know what I'm saying? And oftentimes I do that on people's journey, and they turn away from Christ, they turn away from the church, turn their back, and then they feel isolated. So just keeping that in mind.
So for me, Susan, thank you for sharing that. It reminded me of my grandmother when she was passing, or when she would right before she passed. I remember going to the nursing home in Brooklyn to visit her, and just seeing the condition that she was in. The only time she would smile is like when she hears my voice, or if she knows I'm in the room. And my grandmother, she was never grandma, she was never mama, none of that. She was mommy. Mommy. So it tells you how the bond. I was the spoiled grandkid. Didn't know he was a grandkid. But she had some health issues, and eventually had to end up in a nursing home. And the state that she was in, when I started praying, because I was getting frustrated with my mom and them, and I just started praying. I'm like, Lord, at this point, if you're not gonna heal her, just do what's best for her.
Wow.
Forget about me. Do what's best for her. The one thing I never wanted to do in this life was live in a world without my grandmother. But when I saw her suffering, I realized that you being in this state doesn't make me feel any better. What's going to make me feel better is knowing that you are at peace, whatever that looks like. And it looked like death. It looked like rest. It looked like sleep. And that's what God did. And I was so relieved because she was not suffering anymore. I think our responses to any situation has to really deal with how we manage our expectations. And I say that because a lot of times we come into this thing called Christianity and we have certain expectations. And to be honest, God isn't going to do what you expect him to do. He's going to do what needs to be done that benefits you when it comes to this walk that you're on. So he puts that 1,000-pound cross on you, best believe it's done for a purpose. And while we may not understand it, God knows. In Matthew 16:24, he says, and I'm reading from the New American Standard, he says, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must take up no option, no choice. He must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. If we're going to walk this walk, if we're going to choose to follow Christ, choose to love Christ, choose to carry this cross and endure until the end, then we have to understand that the cross he gives us, though they may not be comforting, which they never are, though it may not be comfortable, it's there to serve a greater purpose in our lives. And with that mentality, we'll be able to endure, because that's how I believe Jesus endured his cross, was seeing that, what I'm doing here is going to be is for the future. It's for these guys. I'm sacrificing myself so that I can have them be with me forever. And that's what brought him the joy, is knowing that he did what he was doing on that cross, on that mountain, for you and for me, so that we can have eternal life with him.
I just want to put a scripture to that in my top 5 easy. Philippians 2:1 and on, but I'm going to read starting at verse 3. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves. That, what he said before, have that mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. My wrap-up thought here is that Christianity as a race is hard to run because it points out that you're not running for self. Right? Like, that's what it points out. It points out that all the things that you thought were good about you, all the things you thought were great, are not. You need to actually put those things aside and run for others. Run for the reality that what you do will impact others to the betterment of themselves, will lift them up. And it doesn't just say to do that, or sorry, I should say it's difficult to do that because I think that goes against our sinful nature. Like, speaking from the biblical standpoint, sin is selfishness. Sin encourages you to think about you. And I know that's hard because when you think about that concept in all things, it doesn't say that your feelings of being hurt when you think about you is wrong. It doesn't say that when someone wounds you, think about is wrong. It just says that is not necessarily the God fault, right? Because God was wounded by us.
Yep.
And still thought about us.
Yep.
Like, God had hurt and pain and still put us first. It's just hard. It's very hard. And I think all of us here are trying to say, like, that's the thing we want you to understand. But if you can do it, though, this is what we talked about yesterday. If you can think about the joy, if you can think about perspective, then it makes it easier to run the race.
I'd say my wrap-up thought is it's not always going to be easy to carry the cross. And sometimes you might find that when you're carrying your cross, you fall to your knees. Like Anderson said, Jesus even fell to his knees. He got weak. It became too much for him to bear at one point. And so if you get to the point in this Christian journey where something is too heavy for you, know that it's not the end of your journey. Know that the Lord, tell him that you are weak and that you can't carry it, or that you don't feel like you can carry it. And I believe that he will send people to support you and surround you to help you carry your cross.
Mm-hmm.
And he will even give you supernatural strength. He says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So my encouragement to you is,
Yes.
it's not always going to be easy. There are going to be trials and tribulations. We all go through them. Sometimes we hurt, but it's not the end of our race.
You guys said everything. Susan summed up everything. There's not really much for me to say. I'm a big advocate for exactly what Susan says. When you get to a place that is heavy, cry out to God, cry out to people who are around you, even if they don't see that nobody seems like they are looking at you. We don't have a time to be, ashamed of our cross and have any time to be kind of shy in what we are experiencing anymore. You have to be bold in your experiences and know that God is going to protect you. He's going to send somebody for your to rescue you, and He's going to give you the peace and the joy that you need when you need it in the race. But also be vocal. Say, "I need help." If I'm struggling, I can call on my sister Susan. I can call on Rob or whoever. I need to make sure that when Christ sent out the disciples, He sent them two by two, right? Because He knows it's not an easy walk. So
Mm-hmm.
remember that even if we have times where we're walking alone, it's not going to always be that way.
Correct.
And He's going to have us. So keep being encouraged, knowing that we have one race to run and we are racing to salvation, and we want to take our friends and our family with us, and know that God loves us on this journey.
So we talked about the cross and what the cross is made of and the reason why we carry it. And honestly, what I got from all of this was basically that the cross is not supposed to be comfortable. It's not supposed to be um, a walk in the park, but we are not supposed to hold it by ourselves. And indeed, you shouldn't. You should always ask for help and know that you have people around you that care about you and that will help you bear your cross or help you figure out how to bear your cross. So, tomorrow we are having a special panelist, and I invite you all to come back and hear from that person. Same time as always, 7:30 on the dot. And thank you so much for watching and commenting and listening. And I encourage you to share, like, subscribe, the whole 9 yards. And have a good night.